Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. You don't truly know what war is until it shows up in a white SUV with a clipboard and a fake smile. I built my home with my own hands on Montana soil. Now a stranger claims it belongs to her grandmother's ghost. This isn't just a land dispute, it's a battle for truth. You don't really know what it means to build a home until you've done it with your own hands. I'm not talking about hiring a contractor or picking out granite countertops. I mean digging fence posts in frozen ground, hauling lumber up a hill at dawn, fixing a busted well pump at 2 in the morning while coyotes howl like it's karaoke night. That kind of home. My kind of home. 20 years ago, I walked away from a perfectly respectable career as an architect in Denver. People thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but the city drained something out of me. All the glass towers and zoning meetings and overpriced brunches, they didn't leave much room for air. What I wanted, more than anything, was space. Real space. So I bought 120 acres of wild, neglected land in the middle of Montana that everyone else had the good sense to ignore. It came with a collapsed barn, a choked-out well, and a house that looked like it had survived a tornado out of sheer spite. But it had bones, and more than that. It had silence. I spent the next 2 decades carving life into that dirt, fixed every beam, dug irrigation trenches, hauled in solar panels when the county refused to run proper lines. By year 5, I'd built a working ranch. By year 10, I'd made it a home. My wife, Mallory, joined me early on. We raised 2 kids here, Aaron and Lily, both Montana tough, born with mud on their boots. Every shed, every corral, every acre of this place has a story. My blood's in the soil. Literally. I still have a scar on my thigh from when I lost a fight with a barbed wire roll. Thing is, nobody ever bothered us out here. The closest neighbor is a retired park ranger 2 miles up the hill, and even he only shows up during hunting season. We're not part of any town or subdivision. No HOA, no nosy committees, no one dropping off flyers about lawn height or approved mailbox colors. Just us, the land, and the seasons. At least, that was the case until the white SUV showed up on the drive last Thursday morning. I was oiling the hinges on the south barn when I saw the dust cloud rising off the gravel road. Didn't think much of it at first. Might have been a lost delivery driver or someone with the wrong address. But then the car stopped, right at the gate, and a woman stepped out like she was inspecting property she already owned. She had the look. Neat blazer, clipboard in hand, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wiped my hands on a rag, walked toward the fence, and nodded politely. "Can I help you?" That smile tightened. "I'm Karen, president of Echo Ridge HOA." I blinked. Echo Ridge? Never heard of it. She extended a business card through the bars of my gate like it was some kind of warrant. I didn't take it. "We need to talk about this property," she said. Karen didn't wait for an invitation. She unlatched the gate without asking and stepped forward like I was late to a meeting I didn't know was scheduled. I didn't say anything right away. Just held her gaze as she strode up to me with the confidence of someone who thinks the world owes them answers. And probably property. "This won't take long," she said, flipping open the sleek leather folio in her hands. "According to our restoration initiative, your land falls within the historic footprint of Echo Ridge." I frowned. Echo Ridge is 7 miles south. This is private land. Bought it myself in '04. Title, deed, clean chain of ownership. There's nothing to restore here. Karen smiled like a substitute teacher explaining multiplication to a kindergartner. "Actually, that's where you're mistaken. See, my great-grandmother, Edith Drake, was the original owner of a large ranch in this area, established around 1920. We've been conducting historical research and property verification for legacy claims." She pulled out a laminated sepia-tone photograph of a crooked old house. This was her home. "We believe that house is the original structure on your property, renovated without authorization." I stared at the photo, then at her. "Karen, that house in the picture was torn down before I ever stepped foot on this land. What you're looking at is gone. I rebuilt from scratch. Nothing standing here now is from 1920. "But the land," she insisted, tapping her manicured finger against the edge of the photo. "The land is part of our family's legacy. You're occupying it under a faulty transaction. Our HOA has recently passed a measure to begin formal reclamation procedures." "Reclamation," I repeated, my voice low. "This isn't a national park. It's my ranch." She pulled out a few printed documents, grainy photocopies of old maps, census entries, and what looked like a handwritten bill of sale in cursive I could barely read. "There's precedent," she said proudly. "The HOA is advocating for historical restitution. If we work together, we can transition the land peacefully, maybe even let you stay as a tenant until it's formally transferred." I laughed. I actually laughed. "You're asking me to give up my home because of a story about your grandmother and some tea-stained paperwork." Karen's lips tightened. "I'm offering you a chance to avoid legal conflict. Otherwise, the HOA will proceed with filing notice of ownership dispute and initiate corrective action through county channels." I took a step closer. "Let me make this crystal clear. I bought this land legally, every square inch of it. I pay taxes. I maintain it. Your HOA, which I've never heard of until 10 minutes ago, has no jurisdiction here. None." She didn't back down. "That's where you're wrong. The county has already acknowledged our documentation. I'll be back with official notice. But I wanted to speak to you first, out of respect." "Respect," I said, shaking my head. "Respect would be knocking before you walk onto someone's property. Respect would be doing your homework before accusing a man of living in your grandmother's ghost story." Karen closed her folio with a firm snap and turned without another word. She got back into her SUV and drove off in a puff of gravel, leaving the gate swinging gently behind her. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of it all. She wasn't joking. She really believed she could take my ranch. 2 days later, I found a document duct taped to my front gate like a death threat from a corporate intern. The heading read, "Notice of Possessory Violation, Echo Ridge Homeowners Association." There was a waxy, fake-looking seal at the bottom, a barely legible signature from someone claiming to be the historical restitution officer, and language so dense it read like someone swallowed a thesaurus. According to this manifesto, I was now occupying Echo Ridge ancestral territory without formal authorization and had until the end of the month to voluntarily vacate the premises to prevent escalation. It warned of corrective measures, administrative penalties, and, my personal favorite, community-enforced compliance. It ended with the words, "Refusal to cooperate will be interpreted as unlawful encroachment." I stood there in my flannel shirt and work boots, holding this pile of HOA nonsense like it was radioactive. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or light it on fire. Instead, I scanned it, printed 3 copies, and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Danner had been around since my kids were in middle school. He was the kind of guy who didn't say much, but when he did, it usually ended arguments. When I dropped the paper on his desk, he raised an eyebrow and read the whole thing in silence. "This legit?" he asked finally. "About as legit as a $3 bill. Echo Ridge is 7 miles south. Their HOA line doesn't come near my fence." He tapped the document. "Karen Drake's name again. She was just here last week. Left a similar notice about a barn outside city limits. County had to shut it down." "So this is her thing now?" I asked. "Claiming everything her great-grandma ever glanced at?" Danner grunted. "She's playing a dangerous game. But so far, it's all just paper and posturing. Unless she steps foot on your land again, not much we can do." I drove home fuming. That paper and posturing was starting to eat at my reputation. When I stopped by the feed store, old man Harker didn't even offer a handshake, just gave me a hard stare and said, "Heard you might be squatting on someone else's legacy." Legacy. Jesus. And the hits kept coming. I got a call from Lily's college advisor. Apparently someone had anonymously emailed the university board claiming I was under investigation for property theft. Aaron's boss at the local hardware co-op asked if his dad was getting sued for stealing land. Karen's poison was seeping into every corner of my life. Then came the public meeting. It wasn't at a courthouse or community center. It was at Echo Ridge's event pavilion, a gaudy metal gazebo next to a man-made pond surrounded by identical houses. I received a formal invitation to attend the monthly HOA gathering, in good faith and cooperation. Against every instinct I had, I went, partly to see how far this rabbit hole went, partly because I refused to be painted as some shadowy thief, hiding behind fences. The pavilion was packed. At least 50 people sat in white folding chairs facing a cheap wooden podium where Karen stood in a crisp blazer like she was running for office. She launched into a speech about reclaiming heritage and correcting the oversights of outdated zoning laws. Then she turned her eyes to me. "Mr. Sutton is here today," she said, all false warmth. "We want to give him a chance to do the right thing, to acknowledge the history of the land he occupies, and step aside with dignity." The room turned toward me. Eyes narrowed. A few phones came up to record. I stood, took the mic she offered, and looked the crowd dead in the face. "My name is Michael Sutton. I bought my ranch in 2004 at a county auction. I have the deed, the surveys, the tax records. I rebuilt every inch of that place. I'm not giving it up because someone's grandmother may have wandered through in 1920. Someone scoffed. Karen stepped closer. "So, you deny the historical connection entirely?" "I deny that it gives you legal right to take my home." There was silence, then a murmur. Karen smiled tightly. "Then we'll proceed as necessary." I handed her mic back without another word and walked out. Behind me, someone said, "Just another land thief." I didn't look back. The first stake appeared on a Monday. Bright orange plastic with a neon pink ribbon flapping in the wind. I spotted it while hauling hay bales along the southern fence line, a little flag planted 3 feet inside my property. I followed the line, and sure enough, every 20 feet, another stake. They ran clear across the boundary like some bureaucratic breadcrumb trail. At first, I thought it might be some mistake from a utility company, until I saw the signs. "Survey in progress. Echo Ridge Restoration Initiative." There were 4 of them, all zip-tied to my fence, printed in bold black on HOA letterhead, and dead center, Karen's name in italics. I called the sheriff again. Deputy Klein came out this time. Young guy, eager, still wore his sunglasses at night. He inspected the stakes, took some notes, then asked the question I dreaded. "You have any idea what this is about?" I showed him the previous notices, the fake legalese, the nonsense about ancestral territory. He didn't laugh. He looked uncomfortable. "They filed a notice of interest with the county registrar," he said finally. "It's not a lien, but it's logged. Says this property is under review for historical claim." "That's not a thing," I said. "You can't just declare a fantasy and get legal traction." Klein shrugged. "I'm not the judge. If they're not physically trespassing, there's not much we can do right now." Sticking stakes on my land isn't trespassing. He gave me that apologetic cop look, the one that says, "I know this is insane, but my hands are tied." I ripped every stake out of the ground that night, burned the signs in the fire barrel next to the chicken coop. Thought that would be the end of it, until the next morning. A white envelope lay on my porch, tucked under a smooth river stone. Inside was a letter, printed, formatted, with a letterhead from the County Land Records Office. Looked official enough to fool someone half asleep. It claimed my title was under dispute, due to a previous encumbrance from 1927 not recorded in public index. It recommended I cease development until the matter was reviewed. It looked real, right down to the name at the bottom. T. Drake, Interim Registrar. I laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. Karen wasn't even trying to be subtle. Still, I made a copy and took it to a buddy of mine who worked at the actual registrar's office over in Bozeman. He confirmed what I already suspected. The county had no record of any such dispute, no registrar named T. Drake, and no legal mechanism for retroactively encumbering property like this. "This is forged," he said flatly. "Sloppy, too." That should have been the worst of it, but it wasn't. That night, at 1:38 a.m., my security cam pinged an alert. I pulled up the feed on my phone and watched live as 4 figures in HOA vests marched up my gravel drive. They carried a metal pole, an HOA flag, and a sign that read Echo Ridge Reserve, Historic Easement, Do Not Enter. They pounded the pole into the dirt 20 yards from my barn and saluted the flag like they were raising it on Iwo Jima. Then they vanished back into the dark. I didn't call the cops, not yet. I saved the footage, downloaded it to a thumb drive, and set a reminder to buy more floodlights. I had a feeling things were about to get worse. After the flag stunt, I stopped pretending this was just some HOA drama spiraling out of control. This was targeted, tactical. I wasn't dealing with a delusional woman anymore. I was dealing with a campaign, so I locked things down. I bought 3 new floodlights, motion activated, and mounted them along the southern fence. Installed 2 more cameras, one above the barn and one hidden in the chicken coop, just for good measure. Rewired the whole perimeter alarm to ping my phone directly. Picked up a couple of no trespassing private property signs the size of small billboards and stuck them everywhere a raccoon could read them. Mallory didn't say much when I showed her the footage from the night before. She just watched, arms crossed, lips tight. When it ended, she said, "What's next? They hang a plaque on our porch?" Our kids were worried too. Aaron started texting more often. Lily called every night, which was nice. Even if the subtext was clear, she thought someone was going to try and burn the place down. I couldn't blame her. 2 days after the flag incident, they showed up again. This time in broad daylight. A black SUV pulled into the driveway, followed by a white truck marked Echo Ridge HOA Enforcement. The door popped open, and out stepped 2 men wearing body armor with security patches on their chests. One of them carried a clipboard, the other a holstered sidearm. Real or not, I didn't care. They didn't belong. I stepped off the porch and met them halfway. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I asked. Clipboard guy didn't smile. "You're Michael Sutton. Last I checked. We're here to inform you that due to the ongoing title dispute and pending historical review, this property is now under interim jurisdiction of the Echo Ridge Homeowners Association." I actually laughed. "You can't be serious." "This notice grants temporary enforcement rights to prevent hostile occupation," he said, handing me a folded paper that looked like it had been drafted by a paralegal on a Red Bull bender. "Until the matter is resolved, we're authorized to limit access to disputed areas, namely the outbuildings and livestock enclosures." I stepped closer. "Try to block my barn and you'll be dodging more than paperwork." The guy with the gun shifted his stance. "Sir, we're not here to escalate." "Then get the hell off my property." Mallory was on the porch now, phone in hand, already dialing. I could hear her talking to the county sheriff before they'd even made it back to their truck. But they didn't leave. Not right away. One of them walked over to the barn and stood by the entrance like a sentry, arms folded, sunglasses reflecting the sky. That was it. I walked past him, opened the barn door, and stepped inside. When I came back out with my post-hole digger slung over my shoulder, he finally moved. Sheriff Danner arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing. I handed him the fake enforcement order and a flash drive with the camera footage. He took it all without saying a word, then walked over to the men and gave them the kind of stare that makes grown men consider other careers. "You're trespassing," Danner said flatly. "Pack it up. Now." They argued. Of course they did. But within 10 minutes, both vehicles were gone. Danner didn't smile. "You need a lawyer," he said, "and backup cameras. Maybe a dog." "I already got the dog," I muttered. "But yeah, lawyers next." I'd never hired a lawyer before, never needed to, but when the people trying to steal your land start showing up with fake badges and enforcement notices, you stop pretending it'll blow over. Her name was Nina Turner. Sharp suit, sharper voice, 40-something with the posture of a fencer and the eyes of someone who'd watched too many HOA board meetings and lived to tell the tale. She specialized in real estate litigation, boundary disputes, and, as she put it, defending good folks from lunatics with letterhead. We met at her office in Bozeman, where I dumped everything on her desk. The forged notice from T. Drake, the fake survey maps, the nighttime flag-raising footage, and the HOA Goon Squad's daylight debut. She looked through each piece without saying a word. When she finally spoke, it was with that dry amusement lawyers get right before they go for the jugular. "This is either the clumsiest scam I've seen," she said, "or the boldest. Either way, they picked the wrong target." She called in a favor with a private archivist, an old professor-turned-researcher named Albert Roth. Looked like a librarian, but worked like a detective. Within days, he started digging through historical plats, deed transfers, probate files, anything that had dust on it. Turns out, Karen's claims had a big, glaring hole. According to Roth, the property she was referencing, the original Drake Ranch from the 1920s, was located about 5 miles south of my land. The parcel identifier in her own evidence matched a location now submerged under a man-made reservoir, thanks to a federal water project completed in 1958. The original Drake land hasn't existed in 65 years, Roth explained. Even if she had a claim, which she doesn't, it's to the bottom of a lake. That alone would have been enough to stop most people. But Karen wasn't most people, and Nina didn't want to just stop her. She wanted to bury the whole damn HOA. So we dug deeper. Roth found a notarized letter from 1982 where the last surviving Drake heir formally renounced any claims to the disputed region and donated their remaining property rights to the state in exchange for relocation funds. The name matched county records. It was airtight. Meanwhile, Nina confirmed that T. Drake, the so-called interim registrar, didn't exist in any professional registry. No notary license, no affiliation with the county. When she cross-referenced the address on the forged letter, it traced back to a P.O. box in Echo Ridge, and the signature matched Karen's cousin, a failed paralegal who'd once been fined for impersonating a legal officer. It wasn't just fake. It was criminal. By the time we were done, Nina had compiled a case file thicker than a phone book. Fraud, forgery, false representation, trespassing, harassment, attempted land seizure, you name it. She drafted a cease and desist letter, so cutting it probably left paper burns, and filed for an injunction the same afternoon. This isn't about defending anymore, she told me. It's about going on offense. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The injunction came through faster than I expected. Nina had filed the paperwork on a Tuesday, and by Friday afternoon, a county judge signed the order. Effective immediately, Echo Ridge HOA and its representatives were barred from entering or interacting with my property in any capacity. No more letters, no more fake enforcers, no more midnight flag ceremonies. Violations would be treated as criminal trespassing. We posted a laminated copy of the court order on every access gate. Nina even suggested I hang one inside the barn just in case someone decided to get cute again. I took it a step further and printed the words "court-protected private property" on a 4x8 plywood sheet and staked it right next to the gravel road. It felt like a win, but it didn't take long for the backlash to start. First came the silence. That suspicious kind, where you know the other side isn't giving up, just recalibrating. Then came the whispers. One of my feed suppliers mentioned a rumor that Sutton bribed a judge. A realtor friend told me Echo Ridge was circulating a memo suggesting I'd used legal intimidation to suppress heritage restitution. It was all vague enough to avoid lawsuits, but sharp enough to stick. Then, the real surprise came. A call from a man named Evan Marsh. "I served on the Echo Ridge HOA board," he said over the phone. "I resigned last week. I think you need to see something. We met at a diner off the highway." Evan was mid-30s, dressed like a guy who used to work tech support but had since switched to landscaping. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were copies of HOA meeting minutes, emails between Karen and board members, and an internal memo titled Phase 2, Claim Enforcement Strategy. "This wasn't just about your land," he said. "Karen's been planning a larger expansion. Your ranch was the test case. If it worked, she was going to go after 3 other properties in the county." The documents laid it out in black and white: proposed zoning overlays, drafted enforcement notices, even budget estimates for acquisition incentives. Karen had presented it as restoring historical continuity. Most of the board didn't even read past the summaries. Evan did, and when he pushed back, she accused him of being hostile to community legacy. He walked. She faked votes, he added. We were supposed to approve funds for a new drainage study. She rerouted them to cover legal costs. I passed the folder to Nina that night. Her eyes lit up like she'd just found a loaded gun in a knife fight. "This," she said, "changes everything." By Monday, 2 more HOA members had resigned, both submitting sworn statements that they'd been misled, pressured, and cut out of key decisions. One even claimed Karen had threatened to accuse him of embezzlement if he spoke out. Nina filed those declarations with the court the same afternoon. Karen, meanwhile, went quiet. No new letters, no press statements, no more lawn sign theater, just silence. But it didn't feel like retreat. It felt like a storm pulling back before the sky cracks open. Courthouse mornings have a certain weight to them. Doesn't matter how calm you try to play it, how many times your lawyer says, "We've got this." When you walk through those glass doors and hear your boots echo off the tile, something inside you braces. It's primal. Fight or flight, except now you're wearing a clean shirt and holding a folder. Nina met me at the entrance with a quiet nod. She wore a dark blue suit sharp enough to cut steel and carried a leather binder thicker than a Bible. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." The courtroom was already half full when we walked in. A few journalists from the local paper sat in the back, notepads ready. Evan Marsh and the 2 other ex-HOA members were near the front, faces tense but determined. On the other side of the room sat Karen. She wore white, not just a blouse or jacket, a full white pantsuit like she was attending a Hamptons brunch or leading a cult. She had 2 attorneys with her, one young and overly confident, the other older and sweating through his collar. She didn't look at me once. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Callahan, took the bench and immediately cut through the posturing. "Let's get to it," she said. "I've reviewed preliminary filings. but I want facts on the record. Nina started with a summary of the property history. My purchase in 2004, the deed, the county survey, the absence of any prior claims. Then she introduced Roth, the archivist. He detailed the location of the original Drake property, the flood project in 1958 that submerged it, and the 1982 letter relinquishing all family claims. He even brought maps, clean, precise, highlighted, showing that my ranch and the Drake parcel had never even overlapped. Karen's attorney tried to object. "Obsolete records, Your Honor." Judge Callahan shut him down. "Historical records are the plaintiff's entire argument. Sit down." Then came the footage. Nina played the video from the security cameras, the HOA team sneaking onto my property at night, raising the flag like they were planting it on the moon. The clipboard-wielding enforcers who tried to block my barn. The letter from T. Drake, followed by evidence that the name belonged to Karen's cousin, who, by the way, had conveniently skipped town a week earlier. We presented sworn statements from the former HOA board members, including Evan's testimony about fake votes, budget misuse, and the internal memo outlining a broader property takeover. Karen's side looked like they were unraveling by the minute. Then Judge Callahan turned to her directly. "Ms. Drake," she said, "do you have any legally admissible documentation proving your claim to Mr. Sutton's land?" Karen stood, composed as ever. "Your Honor, I believe that oral history matters. Community memory matters. Just because something isn't in writing doesn't mean it's not real." The silence in the courtroom was thick enough to drown in. "Ms. Drake," the judge said flatly, "this is a court of law, not folklore hour. Sit down." Karen sat. For the first time since this all began, she looked small. Judge Callahan didn't take long. After closing arguments wrapped and everyone had exhausted their theatrical sighs and rebuttals, she leaned back in her chair, steepled her fingers, and stared at us like a teacher, deciding whether to hand out detentions or expulsions. "This court has reviewed all documentation, testimony, and exhibits," she began, her voice even and precise. "The case before us is not only frivolous, but fundamentally deceptive." She turned her gaze toward Karen. "Ms. Drake, your claims are unsupported by law, contradicted by historical record, and bolstered by fabricated evidence and fraudulent representation. Your conduct constitutes abuse of civil process and will be referred to the district attorney for further investigation." Karen didn't move. She stared straight ahead like her brain had left the building 10 minutes earlier. Judge Callahan continued, "The defendant, Mr. Sutton, is the legal and rightful owner of the property in question, Echo Ridge HOA, acting under the leadership of Ms. Drake, engaged in actions that constitute trespassing, harassment, document forgery, and attempted unlawful seizure of private property. I didn't breathe. I don't think anyone did. In addition to the permanent injunction," she went on, "this court orders the dissolution of the Echo Ridge Homeowners Association, effective immediately, on grounds of systemic misconduct and governance violations. All current enforcement actions by the HOA are nullified." A murmur spread through the room. Furthermore, the court awards damages to Mr. Sutton in the amount of $325,000. This includes reimbursement for legal fees, security costs, loss of agricultural revenue, and emotional distress caused by prolonged harassment and reputational harm. Karen's attorney dropped his pen. One of the former board members actually whispered, "Holy shit!" loud enough for the bailiff to glance up. But it wasn't over yet. "As for Ms. Drake personally," the judge said, fixing her with a look that could freeze concrete, "the matter of criminal charges, including fraud, impersonation of public officials, and falsification of legal documents, is now in the hands of the DA. Effective immediately, Ms. Drake is remanded to custody pending formal charges." And just like that, the bailiff stepped forward, asked Karen to stand, and clicked cold steel around her wrists. She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't say a word. She just stared at the floor, mouth a tight line as they led her out through the side door. The same woman who showed up in white ready to claim someone else's land like she was due a throne, now cuffed like a petty crook. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, but I didn't stop. Nina fielded their questions like a pro. I walked straight to my truck, climbed in, and just sat there for a minute, breathing. It was over. For the first time in months, I wasn't preparing for the next lie, the next threat, the next fence post with a pink ribbon. My land was mine again, not just by title but by truth, in the eyes of the law and everyone watching. Life didn't magically go back to normal after the trial. It never does. You don't walk through months of threats, lies, and legal hell without dragging some of the weight with you. But it got quiet again. And quiet, I'd learned, was the most underrated luxury a man could have. The first morning back on the ranch, really back, I woke up before sunrise, same as always. I stood on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the mist roll across the pasture. No HOA trucks, no fake surveyors, no flags flapping where they didn't belong. Just the creak of the windmill, the chatter of birds, and the smell of frost melting off cedar wood. I rebuilt the south fence the next week, not because it needed it, but because I wanted to. There was something almost therapeutic about putting new posts into clean earth, like sealing up old wounds. I left the burned survey stakes in a pile out back. Sometimes I thought about turning them into a coat rack. The family started breathing easier too. Mallory smiled more. Aaron stopped carrying his sidearm out to feed the goats. Lily sent me a photo of a t-shirt someone made online that said, Echo Ridge HOA, historical fiction meets criminal charges. It went viral. So did the story. Within days of the trial, local papers picked it up, then regional blogs, then some national outlets. The headlines were priceless. Karen claims ancestral ownership of ranch, gets arrested instead. Man fights off HOA with facts, wins big. Don't mess with a Montana farmer. It wasn't just entertainment. Other people started reaching out. Folks in similar fights, people who'd been railroaded by rogue HOAs, homeowners dealing with extortion-level fines and fraudulent threats. I couldn't help them all, but I answered every email I could. Sometimes it helps just knowing you're not the only one. 2 weeks after the trial, I hosted a fall market on the ranch. Local vendors, food trucks, crafts, and live music from a neighbor's bluegrass band. I invited everyone who'd stood by us, neighbors, friends, even the sheriff. Evan came too, still in shock that his name hadn't ended up in a lawsuit. At the entrance, just beyond the new gate, I installed a custom-forged steel sign. Took me 3 afternoons to cut and weld it the way I wanted. The letters were clean, bold, and rust-resistant. They read, My land, my legacy, not your history. People took pictures with it like it was a damn monument. Maybe it was. We grilled burgers, danced under string lights, and raised a toast to clean deeds, clean fences, and the right to call something yours without asking permission from a committee with delusions of nobility. Later that night, as I sat by the fire pit, Mallory leaned against me and said, Think we'll ever hear from another HOA again? I smiled and took a long sip of whiskey. If we do, they better bring better paperwork.